not only do we have to be concerned about what Google's doing, but we really need to pay attention to what Apple is doing. And that'll be interesting because they're very closely aligned partners on certain things. And so how will Apple, within its own ecosystem, impact your ability to bring in new business? Because when you consider how many people have iPhones versus Android phones, you can't just be playing to Google and not playing to Apple.
Yeah, and they, as of today anyway, they get their reviews from Yelp. They're kind of fed in there. And it seems like sort of the long-term play for Apple is they want to be fully like vertically integrated. They want the reviews, they want the map, they want every piece of it, including the search. And there's been some rumors that they're trying to launch a search engine too. And if they do that, then
they could with Apple Intelligence.
Yeah.
If AI becomes the new search engine,
right,
they've got a closed loop ecosystem that all of a sudden we have to learn how to play in.
Exactly.
Hey there, welcome to the Dr. Marketing Tips Show. I am Jennifer.
And I'm Corey.
And today we're going to talk about 5 things that are weighing on our mind as we enter into 2025. Just things that we think are kind of worth paying attention to, things that are changing the landscape, and stuff it is that we're going to pay attention to as we're developing marketing plans and coming up with how we're going to hit the ground running in the new year.
Yeah, so I don't think it's too far of a stretch to say that there's a lot of change that could potentially be happening in 2025. And honestly, we really don't know, but we're trying to plan for those things as much as possible. And there's just, so many things happening, from changes in technology to the landscape of, I don't want to get too political, but just like what's happening around. Around what's happening. I mean, there's a hard cost to some of the things that are proposed right now. And I think whether you're a small practice or a medium-sized practice, hospital, whatever the case may be, the fact is there are some very tangible things that are going to change and could wind up costing you a lot more money.
Yeah, so for me, one of the first things that I'm starting to think about, because I'm putting together budgets for 2025 and looking at our print cost and our cost of promotional products. And I know that not everybody says like, oh, I don't really spend that much on promo products, but if you're getting out into your community and you need those freebie giveaway items, chances are when the presidency changes hands in January, if the tariffs that are being discussed actually take effect, we're going to be looking at double-digit price increases and difficulty to be getting those items. So I've got a handful of clients that we're actually going to do some large orders here in the next couple of weeks, so we don't have to be too stressed about it as like it kind of works its way through.
Yeah, so as we're recording this, it is November 26th, and I believe just yesterday, the incoming administration said that there's a plan to impose a 25% tariff on all imports from Mexico and Canada and a 10% tariff on Chinese goods.
Yeah.
So is that going to change? Is that actually going to happen? We don't know, but if you are a group that goes through a lot of this stuff, it may make sense to go ahead and get those orders in before those tariffs take effect. Because like you said, not only is the price going to go up, but there may be some increased regulation in terms of actually like getting the product
into
here.
The United States.
Right.
Absolutely.
So if there's increased scrutiny there, then not only is it going to cost you more, but then you're not going to have what you need for all those health events that are coming up January, February to kind of kick off the new year.
Well, and then you think of it like, post-COVID, it's not like supply chain just fixed itself. It's not like the cost went down.
Right.
And so we've probably gone up 10, 15, 20% since COVID. And now we're looking at, 10 to 25% more. Just the cost of doing business is more expensive. Things to be looking at and paying attention to for next year. Speaking of that, I think you have a good stat talking about the cost of doing business.
Yeah, so number 2 thing we're paying attention to is actually that rise in the cost of doing business. So some interesting things here. So inflation, as of late 2023, inflation rates have been fluctuating around 3 to 4%, depending on the sector, of course. There's also an increase. I've got some examples for 2 sectors that don't have anything to do with healthcare, but I think it's interesting just to see. One is furniture and household appliances. They're expected to see price hikes go up by almost 54%.
Well, that's the tariffs.
And that's tariffs, and that's also just, again, the hard cost of just materials. So when we think about materials in a medical practice, you may say, well, I don't really have to deal with a lot of furniture, of course. But the reason I bring that up is, if you're opening a new location, or if you've got to buy toilet paper for your current location, you've got to buy pens like we were talking about, just with promotional products, and computers for staff. I mean, all of these things add up. And part of it is the tariffs like we were just talking about, but part of it is just, just the economy changing and prices of everything just going up.
But the fact is, if the cost of doing business is more expensive, and it's just surviving is more expensive, that's going to affect your bottom line, because your employees have to be able to make a living wage to some degree, and you're going to have to keep all of that into account.
Yeah, a couple more stats for you. So wage growth, average hourly earnings in the healthcare sector specifically have gone up approximately 6% year over year. Material costs has gone up for medical products by about 10%. General operating costs, some reports say it's up 15% increase for common supplies such as paper products and cleaning materials. So all of those things together means it's just going to cost you more money.
Yeah, and it all checks out. And so with that, it kind of goes into the third thing that we're really paying attention to. As you look at what AI has done in this past year, what it really has done from a marketing perspective is there's this expectation that we can do more with less, and that we're having to do more with less. But all of a sudden, productivity has reached this all-time high. How long can we sustain at this level of productivity and maintain a really good product? And part of it is your costs have gone up, productivity has gone up, and where's that breaking point?
Yeah, and I think there's a couple things there with AI. So one, specifically with marketing, one of the things that we're paying attention to is the impact that AI is going to have on search marketing. So right now, I'm sure if you've picked up your phone any point within the past 60 days, you've noticed that if you Google something, at the top of it, not every search, but a lot of searches, you get this sort of AI snippet. So what happens is Google is using AI, it's scanning all of the websites it can find related to your query, and then from there, it's pulling those answers up, meaning you most likely are getting the answer you want without clicking into that website. So as that's going to kind of filter into the healthcare sector, all of a sudden, all of your reports may start to say, oh, over the past 3 months, there's been a significant decline in clicks. And that could occur because you did such a good job setting up your website. You've got great SEO, you've got great content, that Google looked at your website and said, oh, these are the answers that this searcher over here needs. I'm just going to spit out this little snippet. They got what they needed, they don't go to your website. So from a reporting standpoint, we're paying attention to that because it means that people no longer on the website. If they don't go to the website, there's less chance that they're going to actually go through our funnel, because obviously they didn't reach the point where the funnel starts. So we are paying significant attention to that. That has a lot of downstream effects just in terms of how people are using their devices every single day. And then also what that does for employees. We use AI every day across many different facets of our business, whether we're producing something for our client or just internally trying to brainstorm or strategize.
Well, you're using it even if you don't intend to use it. It's in everything at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, depending on where you are, what kind of practice you are, the age of the people, that work for you, that's one thing. Some of them are going to start using AI. Some of them are probably going to get into some questionable HIPAA situations. Some of them are just going to ignore it, not want anything to do with it. And then they run the risk of not being efficient and productive like you were talking about. And so I think that there's, a potential to just kind of see an upheaval in just the org chart, based on things like this, because someone could use AI and be considered a rising superstar. It's really just ChatGPT. And then they're put in a position of power. There's so many interesting things.
That's a good point. And I think when I say it's making us efficient, but it's also setting this false expectation of productivity levels.
Yeah.
And at the same time, there's such a difference between knowing how to use something and understanding that AI has opened so many doors, in Windows and it's kind of kicked down the walls. But the fact is that marketing is about to change in a way that it hasn't changed in maybe a decade.
Yeah.
Because the speed of this technology is so fast, and we're just looking at it from, the snippets at the top of search, but it's changing the way we do everything.
Absolutely.
And it's changing where our focus might be. Like you said, like maybe your website isn't as valuable anymore in terms of how we're going to manage reporting, but your website's ever more valuable than ever as it relates to the way it's getting up to the top of those snippets, or as I'm developing chatbots with a couple of clients, or some different things that are going on. So I think marketing's about to make an instrumental shift,
Yeah.
and it's going to be monumental, and it's about understanding where we should put our time and our energy, because we can only that's what we're going to run out of, is time and energy.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting too, because as more people use voice search or just AI in general, what everyone is doing, and probably not realizing it, is training these models for what to look out for and what to do. And so what we're seeing from an advertising side is there's AI built within the Meta platforms, as an example, and they can really help with targeting, because they can say, well, this is your area, this is who you're trying to reach, here's some suggestions and what we should do. I think by this time next year, those models will be so good that it will make it a lot easier for you, if you're watching this or listening to this, to advertise on one of these platforms, if you haven't done it already. Because what they're trying to do, obviously, is give you an incentive to hop on Meta and advertise. So they're putting a ton of effort into that, making it as simple as possible to connect you to the right person that's going to convert. Because again, if people are not searching and clicking on ads the way that they used to, because now they can just get their answer, the only way to reach them, or one of the main ways to reach them, is going to be through these social feeds. And so if they make it as easy as possible, and again, there's millions, billions of people training these models that are going to shift the way that we do business.
Well, we're training the models without even knowing that we're training the models.
Exactly.
We're training the models just by having the data out there and available, the fact that we're using it.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens when everybody is using the exact same model?
Yeah.
All of a sudden there's a complete saturation in advertising, and then how do you actually reach somebody and cut through all that clutter?
Right.
So it's going to be a whole new problem, when we get to it.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I think too, we're training these models, so it's going to get to a point where you can basically just say, I want to reach X, and then one of these models is going to say, well, here's everything you need to do to make that happen. And that's going to be fantastic for the first couple of weeks as we all start to figure that out. And then, like you said, everyone's going to do that exact same thing, and then it's going to be oversaturated, and then we're going to have to shift again. So
last week I was presenting to a group of doctors. We were doing a deep dive into some of their ad dollar spend for the year and where things were. And we're seeing, we're beating industry average, sometimes by double digits, which is always nice to see. We were diving into the details, and so Chad on the team was saying, all right, well, we've got, I don't know, literally 849 keywords within this subsect of ads. And the doctor would say, okay, well, why does it say it this way and not this way? And he says, I couldn't tell you. He goes, I don't even know why all those keywords are in there. We feed it what we know is right, and the algorithm is changing it on a daily basis based on the intent of the user. And so more and more it's being taken out of our hands, with the exception of, us constantly tweaking it, bumping it against patient data, seeing, if ads are actually converting, making sure we're optimizing. But he's talking about the algorithms are doing so much that they're literally, we feed it a certain amount of data,
Right.
and it's morphing into its own. And we couldn't give anybody a straight answer. When we got really darn deep into the details, we couldn't provide a straight answer because we don't know, because the algorithm's changing so fast sometimes.
yeah, and there's even options where a couple years ago you could go into Google and you could say, okay, well, here's a headline, and that was it.
Yep.
Then they changed it, and then they said, give us, as in Google, give us 10 headlines. We'll rotate them through and then pick the best one for you. So the next phase of that is we're just going to generate the ad for you based off of what we know people are looking for. Do you want us to basically do everything for you, yes or no? And then the human interaction is going to be steering the ship and saying, these are the guardrails, or actually that's not a good fit, and kind of helping the model figure that thing out.
But it's just helping the model get better.
Exactly. Yeah, which is great and scary and interesting, and I don't know, that's where we are.
Yeah. So there's some other things as it relates to social, because I think social plays a big part from an ad standpoint, but also just just the sheer volume. One thing I'm paying attention to from social is that Facebook's talking about paying content creators now. You know, that's going to be, you know, that's more of let me compete with TikTok or let me find a way to get those content creators to me.
YouTube is doing that as well.
Yep.
They want to incentivize content creators. Same idea. And then you also got to factor in there's been, I wouldn't call it a mass exodus, but an exodus of people out of X or Twitter and now focused on Blue Sky. All of a sudden there's 15 million active users for Blue Sky out of nowhere.
And that goes back to political landscape, I think, partly, is as the political landscape is getting ready to change, that the personality on X, you know, or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, has also changed. And so we're even seeing lawmakers shift out of Twitter over to this new platform.
Yeah, and then on top of that, Instagram, well, Meta, released a new platform called Threads, which is like their version of kind of Twitter and kind of like inline conversations like that. And then there's all of the regulations with TikTok. You know, if they don't sell by January, they're maybe banned.
Maybe they're gone. Maybe they're not gone. Who knows what's going to happen?
There's too much money. They're not going to be gone. But who knows what it's going to turn into or what's going to kind of rise from that. So, yeah, I mean, TikTok's user base is expected to surpass 1 billion monthly active users next year. So I just don't feel like they're just going to let that go. You know, there's too much money there, but what does it turn into? Does it get sold? When it gets sold, does the algorithm change? Because does that come with it? I mean, there's just so much stuff.
And you know, we're talking about search, but TikTok is what, the number 2 search engine at this point right now, like using search within social.
Right.
Just so many different things. I think what doesn't change is that to be effective on social, you have to create great content.
Yeah.
Or you got to spend money on ads.
Well, and the type of content that people want, I don't think that's really changed either. I think it's that short form video. You know, we see time and time again, regardless of whatever platform you're on, that does the best. That's the most engaging. That's how you're going to get the highest
Short
reach.
form video with doctors, that's how you're going to get the best.
Exactly, yeah. And that's not going to change. Where you put that maybe is going to change. And so that's one of the things we're paying attention to because, you know, we want to obviously make sure that we're spending correctly and we're getting kind of the most bang for our buck. So, you know, does it make sense for us to spend on Blue Sky? Probably not yet, just because, 15
Does it
million.
make sense to open an account and figure it out?
Yeah, absolutely.
Probably.
Does it make sense to spend? Probably not, because there's not enough of an audience. But should we know about it? Absolutely. We should spend time doing that.
Great. There's another thing. All right, so the 5th thing I think that we're really paying attention to, and I've been paying attention to it, especially we were in a meeting yesterday together. And we were talking about, okay, where are we going to put our energy next year? We were talking about directory listings, but we were specifically talking about the volume of calls that we are getting as a result of those directory listings, because you're able to track how many phone calls you get. Phone calls and clicks to your website, and how many people are clicking on their phone to get directions.
Yeah, it's insane. Something like 46% of all Google searches are seeking local information. So they just want to know something that's around them or whatever the best reviewed orthopedic doctor or taco place or whatever it is. So directory listings is something that we've been talking about for a long time. There's research out there that says if your clinic has between a 4 and a 4.9, you make like 20% more revenue than other clinics. That's not necessarily new. I think what's new is, and what we're paying attention to, is the projected shifts in that technology. Google, I mean, every couple of months they release something new into their directory listings. You can now request appointments through there. You can now add insurance info. You can now answer questions. All of that stuff is new within the past probably 24 months or so. So, you know, as we look into 2025, do we know what they're going to release? No, but we know that AI is definitely going to play a role in that because Google's making their big push. There's Apple Intelligence now on the phone devices and their tablets. So all of that, I think, is going to have a direct impact on the listings, which we know for sure brings in patients dollars and calls.
We absolutely do. And another piece that we know is getting ready to change is that Apple seems to be doubling down on those, I don't know what they're going to be called, Apple business listings.
Yep.
You know, almost to compete directly with Google on this, because we're seeing that at least through the platform we use, that we can have the direct communication with Apple to get your maps set up, to get all those directory listings played into. And Apple wasn't a player in this the same as Google was just a couple years ago.
Right.
And so we're seeing that more and more. And so not only do we have to be concerned about what Google's doing, but we really need to pay attention to what Apple is doing. And that'll be interesting because they're very closely aligned partners on certain things. And so how will Apple, within its own ecosystem, impact your ability to bring in new business? Because when you consider how many people have iPhones versus Android phones, you can't just be playing to Google and not playing to Apple.
Yeah, and they, as of today anyway, they get their reviews from Yelp. They're kind of
Yes.
fed in there. And it seems like sort of the long-term play for Apple is they want to be fully like vertically integrated. They want the reviews, they want the map, they want every piece
want
of
it all.
including the search. And there's been some rumors that they're trying to launch a search engine too. And if they do that, then
Well, they could with Apple Intelligence.
Yeah.
If AI becomes the new search engine,
right.
they've got a closed loop ecosystem that all of a sudden we have to learn how to play in.
Exactly. And then what does that do for your directory listings? Because you probably don't have anything set up on Apple Business Listings as of today. So it's just, again,
It's something to pay attention to next year.
Yep. If we look forward a year, I think things are going to be quite a bit different. And AI is going to be part of that conversation, regardless of how you slice it. But I think these 5 things kind of, if you're, at least by listening to this, you're ahead of the curve. And now it's just a matter of, figuring out what to do with all this stuff.
I have one more. I know we said 5, but let's do 5 plus 1.
We'll do a bonus. Okay.
We'll do a bonus. So if you've listened to other episodes recently, we've talked about the consumer trend survey that came out from Press Ganey.
Mm-hmm.
I think one thing we really need to be paying attention to as we go into 2025 is that almost 61% of people are only accessing your practice website on their mobile phone.
Yeah, that's a great point.
61%. We've never seen numbers this high, and that's only a survey of about 1,000 people. Who knows what the age groups of those people are? But the fact is if you're building a new website, you really should just pay attention to the mobile site and have the desktop be a secondary at this point.
Yeah, that's a good point because even as of a couple years ago, when responsive websites really came out, that was all the rage. Where essentially that means that you have a desktop site, it will size itself down to a device. And a lot of the websites now, they'll do that automatically, which is great. But they're not designed mobile first. So that desktop site goes down into a phone, but maybe it hides the menu or it hides the book button, or you lose an element that shows your surgeon's expertise. And you're not paying attention to those things because why would you? It said it's responsive, the website goes down. And I think if you're building a new website, that's a really great point, that now it is time to put mobile first, design mobile first, conversion focused, and then worry about the desktop piece after.
I completely agree, and it changes the way that you approach it. It changes the way you're negotiating that contract with whoever your web vendor is going to be. It changes a lot of those conversations.
Yeah, and then it'll ultimately change the user experience, because if it's easier to book on the phone, and this may sound silly, but if it's also easier where my thumb is to hit that book button rather than have to crawl up the phone and go, it makes a difference. And that can be the difference between, getting a patient or having them go somewhere down the street.
And it can be the difference in whether or not Google prefers your site versus someone else's. It's all tied together.
Absolutely.
Lots of things to be thinking about for next year. Lots of changes on the horizon. If you need anything, feel free to reach out. We'd be happy to answer any of those questions. And with that, I'm Jennifer.
I'm Corey.
We'll see you next time on the Dr. Marketing Tips Show. Thanks a bunch.
Bye, guys.
If you want more like this, hit like and subscribe so you'll always be alerted to new episodes when they come out. And if you want information about us, visit us over at insightmg.com. That's insightmg.com. We'll see you on the next episode.